Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, greetings and salutations. Today I have got Scott Green, who is the founder of Bittytax. And Bittytax is an open source crypto asset calculator, tax calculator, which is something that everyone needs and will need in the future. And Scott is a professional software engineer, and we did meet at the CoinGeek conference in February 2020, which seems like a lifetime ago now. And I must state that this is not financial advice. And please see the disclaimer in the description box. But basically, thank you very much for coming, Scott. This is an extremely useful tool. And you're going to tell me all about it, hopefully.
That's right. Thanks for having me on, Diddy. So it's an open source, tax calculator for crypto assets. I started the project back in, I think it was summer of 2018.
Oh, quite a while ago then.
Quite a while ago, yeah. I mean, so I'd made some profits during that, the bull run of like late 17, 18.
Yeah. I mean, it's December 2017, I think, is when, if I remember rightly, is when BTC got to about 20,000.
That's
and it
right,
was,
yeah.
There was a massive hype around that time as well, yeah.
That's right. It's a lot of people got into it at that time. But I knew I'd gone over the allowance, because you get this, we can talk about you get this capital gains allowance of like 12,000. Well, it's probably about 10,000 back then, I think it was. But I knew I'd gone over the allowance, and I had this kind of, figure out how much I had to pay in tax. And looking around, there wasn't very much information about it. I mean, I think at that time, HMRC had published a guidance in, I think it was March 2014.
Okay, so for people who are over the other side of the water in the States and everything, we're talking about the UK HMRC, which is now His Majesty's what is it? What's the R for?
Revenue
and Customs. That's it. So His Majesty's Revenue and Customs. Yeah. And so the allowance that you're talking about is what the British Revenue and Customs Service allows for businesses. So go on, carry on.
That's right. Because I talk about the tax. Obviously I'll talk about very much UK focus, but we'll go over it, but lots of the rules are very similar for UK and Europe and so on. But yeah, HMRC were one of the first countries to put guidance out in 2014. I think USA and a few European countries did at that time, but it was very, very brief. And it was actually the main purpose of it was at that time was to clarify whether you had to pay VAT when you were buying Bitcoin.
When you were buying it.
Yeah. So, luckily we didn't have to, because you can imagine if you had to pay 20% on top of the price of Bitcoin, we wouldn't have been very competitive. So luckily they clarified that you didn't have to pay VAT. I think so there wasn't really much in it. It talked about, it could even be so speculative, it could be attributed to gambling, so there wouldn't be any tax and stuff like this. So I think HMRC thought it was probably just a kind of a fad or something that was going to go away. They didn't take it too seriously. Yeah. So there was that document. Nothing much else. I think a few accountants had written to HMRC for clarification, and they'd made some of these letters public on Reddit and stuff like that. And there wasn't any software. There wasn't any software available, really. There was some, not for UK, because UK has quite complicated the tax rules. And so I kind of thought, well, I need to work this out. And it's definitely something you can't, it's so complicated. You can't really do it with a spreadsheet and a calculator. You really need software to do it.
So what were you doing beforehand? You said, because you said you're a software engineer. So what kind of software were you working on before?
So I've worked in telecoms for most of my career. So I used to work at Marconi for about 10 years, and I worked at I worked at EE, or T-Mobile EE.
Yeah.
For about 10 years. So telecom software engineering was my background.
Okay. And so this was kind of like a kind of passion thing then, really, more than anything, wanting to sort out the problems that you were encountering yourself.
That's right. Yeah, I kind of wanted to come up with a solution, and I just thought, I need to work it out. I didn't at the time. I think I didn't. I didn't open source the project till about a year later. I think it was May 2019. I made it open source, just because it had been such a headache for me. But I thought, I think everybody else could benefit from it. I mean, now there's a lot more. There are commercial, sort of web-based solutions where you can upload your transactions and so on and do calculation. But at the time, so there wasn't anything kind of open source really.
No, okay. So, I mean, this is your github.com, Bittytax.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Bittytax. So, and I am going to share the page. Yeah. So, do you want to talk us through it? Because tax is a nightmare.
Well, I can talk if you want to talk. Well, we can talk about the tax in the tax in general, kind of, or the tool, or maybe we can start with.
Well, start with this. We've got Bittytax here. We've got an
Okay.
overview. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
this is a GitHub page.
Yeah. So the tool, I mean, the tool works for any, any, I mean, supports about how many tokens are there? About 10,000 different tokens, that can be priced and everything. It's very BSV friendly, just because I've always been a kind of big blocker since the beginning, so it does support a lot of the BSV wallets like Handcash. Handcash have been really good. So you export your transaction history as a CSV file, and so that has every transaction in it. And then you process. So you kind of work the tool in sort of two parts really. The first part is to take these sort of raw data from all these exchanges and wallets, and it normalizes them into a sort of standard format and puts them into a spreadsheet. And then the spreadsheet it gives you like a little drop down sort of menu, so you can categorize each transaction, because for a wallet, it's just going to see a deposit and a withdrawal, money coming into your wallet or money coming out of your wallet. It doesn't know the context of those. Only you know that. Did you spend it on, I don't know, is it posting on Twitch, or did you gift someone some funds or whatever? So you have to categorize it, because depending on the category, it depends how it's categorized for tax. Whether it's what type of disposal it is. So you need to do that. You need to categorize it all. And then once you've done that, so you've got the data in a normalized format, you've categorized it, you can then process it, and it will then look at the transactions for the tax year and work out your gains and losses for each disposal. And there's also sort of the income tax side. So, if you're receiving tokens, if you're staking, if you're mining, then there's income tax to pay and stuff like that. So it works all that out, and it gives you a PDF tax report with all this data in. And it also audits everything, because obviously, you have to make sure things are accurate. So it'll give you an audit of each wallet. So, how much BSV should you have in your Handcash wallet? How much BSV have you got on, Gravity, or how much BSV have you got, whichever other wallet? You have to make sure they're all accurate and then process every transaction. But you need to have, this is the problem, the headache of it all, is you need to have every transaction going back right from day one. I mean, you might have been, if you've been in Bitcoin, I've been in since 2013, which is why I had a real headache with all this in 2018, because I had to go back and basically create the history of everything I'd ever done. And in the early days, I was buying every new token and trying new exchanges and giving airdrops and God knows what. Things have been hacked, and you have to have those records. And sometimes the exchanges like Mount Gox and FTX recently and stuff like this, you can't get records of these exchanges anymore. So you need to be kind of keeping this history all the time,
and a lot of people
really.
lost access to wallets and things like that as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
there is processes. If you can't get access to things, you can there's you can talk to HMRC, something called a negligible value claim, where you can sort of say, well, I can't access these tokens anymore, and you can agree what value they should have. so you can try and crystallize a loss. But sometimes if you've had tokens stolen, because they might be recovered at some point, you can't really crystallize a loss for them, you know. But it can get, you know, you can end up having to pay a lot of tax on something you haven't got the funds.
Yeah.
And that's another big problem in the you know, in this space. You could quite easily, I mean, we can talk about some of the rules about disposals and stuff, but you can quite easily build up quite a big tax liability that you need to pay in fiat, but you haven't got those funds because you've just been inside the kind of, you know, you've never taken profit, but you can still have a big tax bill.
Yeah.
So yeah,
so like, for example, in the UK, April is the end of the tax year, 5th of April it is. So, you know, if you're self-employed, solo entrepreneur, whatever, you know, solopreneur, etc., businesses, whatever, and you've never done any of your taxation on your crypto assets, then you need to go right from the very start of when it was that you started. But for example, if you keep doing it every year, I'm assuming it's just like a normal tax return. You go from last April's to this April, or do you still need to? There's no difference there, is there, with a taxation for crypto assets?
No, it's still annually and everything. You need to report it, but you still need to, but you need to calculate whether you need to, you know, what you need to pay and so on. That you still need that whole history. So you can't, just because you think, okay, I've made a profit this year, you still have to go back to the very first transaction to work out, rolling forward, you know, what value, what cost basis these assets have, you know, because I don't know, maybe people have been in BSV, but some people might have been in, you know, probably Bitcoin from the start, or Bitcoin Cash, and they've been, you know, they followed the kind of the trail. They've had forked coins and so on. Forked coins have to be, you know, calculate the cost for those and so on, the cost basis of each one. So yeah, and I mean, in the UK, the each asset is held in a separate pool. So the price is kind of you calculate an average cost or a cost basis for that asset. I think in the US they use like a FIFO method, first in, first out, and so on, to price. Some other European countries do that. But unfortunately for us in the UK, the HMRC rules for this taxation is very complicated. It's based on how you calculate stocks and shares.
Okay.
Because it's seen as, because crypto assets are seen as property. They're not currency, and it's not a currency. It's like actually what Dr. Wright always says about, you know, it's not crypto and it's not a currency, which is right. It's kind of seen as property. It's not really its own asset class yet, so legally it's not. So all the legislation, all the guidance that comes from HMRC is just guidance. It's HMRC interpreting existing legislation, which is primarily the Taxation of Chargeable Gains Act of 1992. So they're saying, okay, we're applying old world taxation rules to crypto assets.
Yeah. Which, okay, yeah. Like you say, I mean, it's a bit of a minefield, isn't it? Really, and especially
it's very complicated. Yeah, I mean, there are groups like Crypto UK, which represents the industry, and they're trying to sort of work with HMRC to see if they can simplify things. But
yeah, because I mean, if every time that you go and do a tax return in April, and then you're having to go all the way back to the beginning every single year. I mean, books, you know, you throw your books away after 7 years. They don't need them, you know. So how does that work? Yeah. You know,
well, if you've got you can sort of, you can, as long as you don't, there's like a 30-day rule, okay, where if you buy back the same asset within 30 days, it's handled different. There's a special case for it, right? It's called the bed and breakfast rule. But if you didn't do anything in crypto for 30 days, you could then kind of rebase it, or sort of baseline it again. So you basically throw away all the old transactions and then set the cost basis of each of your wallets, and then work forward from that. So there are kind of, you don't have to have it, you can kind of, you know, like take a sort of like a checkpoint, I guess you could call it, in your kind of history,
Mm-hmm.
But most of these crypto crypto asset software, tax software, they sort of replay the whole history again, and you work it out. It's very complicated, and this is why I think in some ways, the whole thing about microtransactions is great, right? But it's an admin nightmare,
Yeah.
because if you use a commercial, like obviously Bittytax is open source, it's free to use, so there's no transaction limits on it. I think we've had someone put through about 200,000 is the highest we've had through, 200,000 transactions through it. But there's no limit. It just, it'll just take its time chunking through all the data, But some of the commercial offerings, they have caps on how many transactions you can upload, because obviously there's a cost to their servers that are storing all this data.
Yeah.
So the more,
So
in a way, it can get
as I
quite
say,
expensive, the more.
if you've got 1,000,000 1 penny transactions, like in and out, I mean, that's going to take quite a lot of time to be able to
Yeah, a lot of
process
time to
through, isn't it?
process.
Even
Yeah.
if it's just that, even if you've made no profit whatsoever, or you haven't even made a loss, maybe you've got 1,000,000 in and 1,000,000 out or something, and it just cancels itself out. It's going to take a lot of time.
It's a lot of time processing for something that's, it's a shame, because I think it's one thing that holds back a lot of adoption for this really. I think once you realize the headache of it, you might, I personally probably avoid doing too much using BSV or crypto, because of the headache. I mean, why would you buy something with crypto when you've got that admin overhead, when you can use whatever, your phone or whatever, and use just cash or your currency? It's so much easier.
For you, what's the perfect, what are the perfect businesses that you would consider that use it? Because I've got my own ideas. I think the UK tax office would work really well using BSV, and same with gambling, and varying other businesses like the cruise industry and stuff. I think would be great for using it. But for yourself, I mean, where do you see BSV perfectly placed?
Well, I mean, eventually, it's been talked about. Eventually, at some point, you probably have kind of taxation on the blockchain. So you have some sort of transaction output that's going to the tax automatically. So you haven't got to do any calculations then.
Which is how I see would be perfect if you actually did that at the very point of sale, the very point of sale, or the point of whatever.
I mean,
it would be
so it wouldn't matter about microtransactions then, because there'd be a micro tax payment at the same time, right?
At the same time, which would.
I think we're a long way off then. I mean, these are things that I think are more things that need to be agreed at kind of like protocol level, really, than because they need to be standardized so that everybody does this. I think we could utilize the blockchain better if there was some metadata around each transaction, because to say, what was it you were doing for tax purposes? Because I don't think there's, I mean, you can analyze the blockchain and try and work out what they were doing, but it's probably easier to put some metadata in there and tag things, so if it's is it a disposal or not, or so yeah.
I like this bit. Why use Bittytax?
Well, yeah. I mean, these are the benefits, as like I say, like no transaction limits. So if you have got a lot of microtransactions, a lot of people like it because of privacy as well. Because a lot of these commercial offerings, you basically got to upload all of your, data from exchanges. It's got all your, all your addresses and stuff like that. So
now, for a non-technical person like myself, and I don't pretend to be a developer in any way, shape, sense, or form, or a software engineer, because that's not my bag. But it says you will need Python installed on your machine before you can install Bittytax. So for somebody like myself, then, who knows nothing about this stuff, I would need to download your installation guide and read it all the way through.
Yeah,
so
it's a little bit. It's a little bit. A little bit techy, a bit geeky, you got to load Python, and there is a wiki page that shows you how to install it. It's actually pretty easy to do. But yeah, I am looking at, trying to make it a little bit simpler to install and stuff like that, to make it a little bit easier to use. But at the moment, it's a little, you have to install Python first.
So is there any way that you would be able to make this like an app within Handcash or something like that? Is that a daft question?
Possibly. The only thing is because so for every asset you dispose of and you purchase, you need to get like a market valuation for
Mm.
that, the cost at the time. You know, how much was it in GBP that you at that point in time? You know, and so there's a number of price APIs we use, like Crypto Compare and CoinGecko and so on. And because it's open source, we can use those for free, which is great.
Yeah, yeah.
But the trouble is, and well, when you run it locally on your machine, you know, it's you as a user using that API. But when you run it as an application, then you're kind of you're it's like coming from one entity, so there'll be throttling on it and so on. So you'd have to, yeah, I mean, we'd have to
Well,
change.
I must admit, I am going to use this because obviously we have got April coming up, and I've been using BSV for the last year or so.
We'll have a play, you know, if you get stuck, and I'm happy to
Well,
help.
I mean, there's Money Button, there's Handcash, there's RelayX, you know. So what you're saying
Yeah,
is, I mean, like you say, Handcash is really easy. You just get in touch with Handcash, and they'll send you a CSV file over. So, you know, how would you use if you can't get that from RelayX? How would I do that with RelayX? How would I
yeah.
get
So yeah, so
my
Handcash is great, right? They were one of the earliest ones, and they sort of take it seriously, and the reports are really good because I think
yeah.
lots of companies do these things as these tax reports, like as a just a sort of nice to have thing.
Yeah, this is
So,
one of the reasons I've not gone mad and used a lot of the stuff in the wallets is because of this side of things. So go on.
yeah. Well, some of them, okay, so some of them don't have exports, okay? So what you can do, actually, it was Joshua Hensley who did a video about this. Credit to him. What you can do is you can calculate if you control the keys. So if you've got the seed phrase and you know the derivation path, you can create the XPub, and then for those wallets, right? So if you can create the XPub for for RelayX, I think you can do it for Simply Cash. You can do it for
The Cent B and Money
yeah,
Button.
there's a few of them where you own the keys. Okay, you can create the XPub, and then what you can do is with Electrum SV, you
Yep.
can create what they call watch-only wallets, and this is a quite useful. I do this myself. It's quite a useful tool. So you create watch-only wallets for all these other wallets that you've got, and every time a transaction happens, it will just drop into that wallet, and you can annotate it, which is great. So every time something happens, you can put a little note in there and say what it was, what you were doing. You know, you're buying something or you're receiving
Mm-hmm.
a gift or
Yeah.
whatever. And then you can export, because Electrum SV has an export function. You can export that and then process it with Bittytax. So I've done it for a Money Button as well. That's another one. I don't use it so much nowadays, but in the past I used to use Money Button a lot, and
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can process all those. So
Yeah.
that's a ways around that kind of. If the wallet doesn't have it, if you've got the keys, you can get the data out.
Well, that's a really interesting thing I wasn't aware of. I mean, I had my head down in other things as well. So this is good to know because, you know, like if you are just, you know, using and you're not paying attention to all of the videos that are being uploaded and all of the technical aspects of things that are being said, then that's a really
Yeah, it's a
interesting.
really good
Yeah,
little tip
yeah,
there. I
really
mean,
good.
the other thing, a good tip would be, I think, is Gravity's closing, isn't it? Is it closed now, or it's closing in the next day or two, isn't it? Really, really important is make sure you export your history from Gravity before it disappears.
Yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
as well as taking out, it's not just a case of taking your assets out. Make
It's
sure
taking all of
you
the
export
history.
your history, because if you've lost that, then
Yeah.
you're in trouble.
So, I mean, with Gravity itself, then would you do the same? How would you do that? How would you export
So
that history in Gravity?
Gravity are great. They've got an export. They've had an export. Tax format. Transaction format for quite a while. So yeah, you just go on, export that file, and then you put that through Bittytax, the converter, and it will normalize it all and work out what your trades are and price it all accordingly, and then you can
Do you know what the date was that
I
the
thought it
end
was
date
soon. I
was?
thought it was soon.
so the end of March maybe, or even before that.
Maybe another couple of
I'll
weeks
have
or
to reach
something.
out to Michael Hudson and find out what was going on there.
Yeah,
But that's
yeah.
also a good tip as well, because that again is something I'd not thought
Yeah, I
about.
mean,
As
no,
a
no. I mean, the best. I mean, we've had so many exchanges and things disappear. I mean, they get hacked, or they go to Chapter 11. um, my advice would be every time you do a trade or anything, keep a record of it. And some of them have exports. Some of them you don't, but just take a screenshot or something.
Yeah,
Make sure
yeah,
you've got it captured, because you need records. You're legally in the UK.
obliged. Yeah,
You're legally required to have records of
yeah.
everything.
Mm. I imagine that's in every country in the world, to be quite honest with you. But
Yeah,
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 I mean,
yeah.
it's like I'm a bit like, if I've spent something, I'll take it. But I must admit, when you're just sending a penny here and a penny there and a penny there, it's like, no, I'm not keeping track of that at all in any way
No, no,
whatsoever.
no.
Um, so explain. This is a transaction record is represented as a row of data which contains the following fields in the order given. So
Yeah, so that's the difference. So that's just got categorization of each transaction. Um, so you've got deposits and so on. That's money moving between your own wallets. So
mm,
when you move funds between, say you move your money from hand cash to Gravity, that's not a taxable event, right? Because
yeah,
it's wallets that you own, okay? But the strange thing is the transaction fee that you pay for the transfer, because you're paying for a miner to include that transaction in the block, you're paying for a service, okay? So
yeah,
that transaction fee is actually a taxable event.
right,
So
yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
people think, well, I haven't done anything, I'm not spending my crypto, but you just move it between your two wallets and you've actually spent, whatever, how many Satoshis it was to
yeah,
move.
yeah, yeah. Even if it's a fraction of a cent,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
still a
So
taxable.
so that's kind of, so you need to kind of keep track of that, all these movements between wallets. It's also good to track those, just so you can audit everything to work out how much you've got in what wallet, to make sure things are tying up. Then you've got obviously tokens there you've mined. So if you're in a mining pool or you're mining yourself, you need to know about those, because at the time they're mined, the time you receive the fund in the wallet, you need to pay income tax on that, and it's calculated by the market rate at the time it hits your wallet.
Mm, mm,
And again, you're liable for the tax on that, even though you may not have cashed any out into fiat.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
So so you could be building up a tax liability. You need to be aware of that and make sure you take profit or whatever you've got funds to cover or everything you're doing. The same with staking, a proof of stake and so on. So if you're receiving tokens for staking, it's income tax or interest, dividends and so on. Yes, income. Gift received. If you receive a gift, I mean, lots of us have been sending tokens to each other. You're trying to onboard
yep,
your friends and all that sort of thing. Okay. So if you receive a gift, that's fine. It's just, you get it goes into your the pool of money that you calculate. But if you gift it to somebody else, so if I gave you, I don't know, some BSV Diddy, that's a taxable event.
mm.
I'm actually taxed on that, but at the market rate at the time I send it to you.
Well, you tax twice then, because you taxed on the amount you send me and you taxed on the fee.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
It's very complicated, which is why you need software. And what else? So airdrops. So airdrops is a bit of a strange one. I think this is different in some countries. In the UK, if you didn't do anything to get the airdrop, okay, so say they just randomly, you just dump some coins in your wallet,
Mm,
that's not taxable for income tax. But if you provided a service to get those airdropped coins, so like some, like on Coinbase, there's things like called Coinbase Earn, where you can watch a video or you can do a quiz, and
oh,
they can,
right. Okay.
and they can
I don't personally, but that's good to know. But yeah, those
yeah,
services are available. Yeah. Okay. So you watch a video, you maybe get
those
a couple
sort of
of
things.
links.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that then you would be liable for income tax, as you've kind of done something in return for that airdrop. It wasn't just a sort of a random thing, right? But that's different. In some countries, it's all seen as income tax. In the UK, we have this sort of exception. And then you've got the other withdrawals. So that's tying up with moving between your wallets. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another one. When I think a lot of people don't realize when you spend crypto, that is a disposal as well. So if you're paying for, any goods or services, it's a disposal. And I don't think in BSV they have them so much, but I know they did sort of these crypto like debit cards and so on were quite popular, So
again, I know RelayX did one. I had a card. I
that's
never
right. Yeah, they
actually
did one,
used
didn't
it.
they?
Yeah, but basically anything that you would have spent, you would have put onto the card and then spent, you would need to pay an amount on. It's a taxable event.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Well, it all needs to be calculated. There might not be anything to pay, but you need to calculate it. You might
calculates
have made
it.
a loss, you might have made a gain, but you need to know
Yeah.
what that is. What's the other? So gift.
Yeah.
Oh no, gift sent. So yeah, when you send a gift to somebody else, that's like I said, that is a taxable event.
So yeah, so basically on when we go on Twitter and we go, put your hand cash handle in, and
Yeah,
then we
yeah,
send you a
yeah,
penny because we want you to watch my video. Then that is basically, it's a gift that's been sent to somebody. Even if it's just a fraction of a cent, it's still a gift. It's still a taxable event.
Yeah, yeah. The exception to that is there's one gift. So if you gift to your spouse or civil partner, that's exempt. So that's not taxable, and that's actually quite a good. You can basically give some crypto to or whatever to your spouse, and it's a way of
1,000
doubling your allowances. So you can use up to allowances and so on.
So looking at lost though, okay, so lost tokens that have been lost or stolen. So if you haven't got access to a wallet, basically, and you've not had the access to a wallet for a good couple of years, how does that work?
Well, you're supposed to contact HMRC and request what they call a negligible value claim. So you're basically saying that they're worth nothing because I've lost them. But it depends how you've lost them. If you kind of prove them, they're never going to be recovered. Then you can crystallize a loss.
So, for example, say I had a wallet a couple of years ago, don't use that wallet anymore, haven't used it for years, but actually at that time, that particular year, say it was 2018, did incorporate what was spent in the tax amount. You don't need to go any further than that because you've already declared what you had and you're not using the wallet anymore.
If you're not using it anymore, well, yeah. I mean, if you're not making any other transactions with it, yeah, it's.
Well, say there's nothing in the wallet anymore. You've taken everything out. You did your you did your inland revenue. You did your tax return at the time in that year, and you're not using that wallet anymore. There's no reason, is there? I mean, is there any reason?
The only thing is, I mean, this is a trouble when you have lots of wallets. There's nothing to stop somebody putting something into your wallet without.
Now this is actually that's a good point. That's a good point. If you've given your address to people previously, recalled that. Actually, that is a really good point.
So you got to be careful. So you have to kind of check all these. Every wallet you create, you got to kind of keep a look on it, because if you receive something, depending on how you receive, most of the time it's okay because you're not taxed. There's been a lot of sort of on my Money Button wallet. I get all these sort of like silly tokens and things gifted or whatever. They're
now
not
gone. Yeah.
I mean they're fine because they're not really taxed unless you dispose of them, so it's okay. It depends on the situation, really, whether what those funds are for.
What those tokens are as well. I've got some tokens, but they're only literally like a 10% off kind of thing. Nobody's ever used one, and I doubt anybody would use one, but it's like, there is a DIDS token in a Money Button wallet, which is literally 10 or 15% off a piece of artwork if you buy a piece of artwork off me, but then that itself, a token, isn't a taxable event, is it? Because it's just a discount gift voucher.
Yeah, that's like an airdrop, I guess, isn't it? It's like you've just gifted somebody, isn't that right?
Well, just yeah, you give a token to someone, and that allows them to have 10% off
Yeah, yeah,
a painting.
yeah,
So that's not a taxable event.
yeah.
However, if somebody buys a painting, then that is a taxable event.
That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So what else have we got? We've got buy quantity, buy asset, buy value, sell quantity, sell asset. So yeah, so if you've I mean, this is probably going to be really simple for somebody, but some people it's not. If you've bought £100 worth of BSV,
Mm-hmm.
and then that has then a value of £300 within a tax year, then you need to pay
You need to
tax
calculate the
on
gain.
the
Yeah, the gain on
gain.
that. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
But if you've bought £100 and then that value is now £30,
Yeah. You can you
write
can
that off
claim
as
a
a loss.
loss.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one thing to be wary of, I think this is one thing that people don't realize is, so yeah, when you convert to fiat, into GBP or whatever your national currency is, that's a disposal, that's a taxable event. But also when you convert from one token to another, so say you might have used Bitcoin to buy BSV, that is a disposal of BTC and an acquisition of BSV. Okay, so
Mm.
you're actually creating a taxable event, but you haven't got any fiat to pay for it. So again, you need to be mindful of that and make sure you're keeping records and you've got, you've got
Yeah, otherwise you
the
could get
tax.
a bit of a headache when you get a massive kind
You
of
get a
tax
big bill
bill
and your tokens aren't
on
worth
your doorstep. You're
anything.
like, oh, I can't pay it. I don't have
No.
any money. Yeah, okay.
And another complexity with the trading, which is again why you need software, is when the trade fee that you pay. So say you convert Bitcoin into BSV, you
Mm.
paid a trade fee to the exchange for that
Yeah,
conversion. The fee has to be split between the assets. Okay, so 50-50. So half the fee was paying for the disposal of BTC, and half the fee goes on the acquisition of BSV. So
yeah. This is why I
it's
don't trade.
horrible.
Yeah. Personally, I don't trade, but this is a thing I imagine is an absolute nightmare for people that do trade.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
again, it's one reason I don't trade is because I understand the fact that for every trade is a taxable event.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And a lot of exchanges, they break your trades down. Okay, so they do do like partial trades, to like little fills, and so you can have hundreds of them,
yeah,
even for one transaction that's
yeah,
broken up.
yeah.
So yeah, lots of
So,
admin headache.
I mean, do you think? I mean, is this something that probably will be done by AI in the future, or is this an opening for? I mean, there's a big job market out there for crypto tax, you know,
I think
auditors?
hopefully things will improve. I mean, AI might be quite good at analyzing the blockchain and looking to try and work out what the transactions are. Okay, you could look at the scripts and so on and the transaction outputs and try and work out what you were doing. Maybe that'd be a useful. So you haven't got to categorize all these things manually. That'd be a good benefit of something like that.
So then it's saying either here as well, we've got transaction type dictates which fields in row are required, either mandatory or optional.
Yeah. So yeah, so
Mandatory,
things like you can see the buy value field. So you can specify the value if you know what it was. So if you knew what BSV was at the time, and you can put it in there. If not, it will take the price, a market price from one of these price APIs, and
yeah.
it'll populate that for you. But you have control over it if you want to manually add these prices as well. It's kind of completely flexible.
So there's a lot of reading to
There's a lot
do.
of reading, yeah. I mean, if you read through it, I've tried to. I mean, it refers to the guidance, the HMRC guidance, but if you read it through, it'll hopefully kind of help
Makes sense in other, yeah,
familiarize you with what all the
international,
different tax rules are.
yeah.
Yeah,
But the
right.
great thing is there is a lot of reading, but literally you do go into in depth in everything that you just spoke
Yeah,
about, like with your deposits, your withdrawals. It's all here
it
anyway.
is complicated. There's no easy way around it. It is
No,
complicated, and I think once you're aware of that, you can make time for it, and make sure you've got the records and so on. But yeah, I mean, I mean, I know lots of people who've been struggling with this because obviously they contact me, and some people are literally have to put their lives on hold for for weeks to sort this stuff out.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
not,
Well,
it's not great for
I mean,
business or entrepreneurs because they're not
no.
building things; they're doing
Um,
spend their time doing taxes.
and what worries me a little bit is, I mean, it's a great thing to try and help the poorest people by being able to send, a bit of money over to them or whatever.
Hmm.
But are say, people is everybody aware of the tax, the tax rules? If you're living in a village in Africa, are you necessarily aware of what you have to do within
No, I don't think they
these,
are. I mean,
you know?
I think it was in 2021, HMRC did like a market research to see whether people were actually, had they read the guidance, did they understand it, and of the results. I think there was a question like, if you sell a crypto asset for fiat, is it a taxable? Is it taxable? Then only 50% thought it was a taxable event.
Well, there's a lot of people that don't know what Fiat is. They think it's a car, yeah, because they don't have, there's no
I know.
reason
Well,
for
we're in a bit of a bubble, aren't we, where we know about
yeah,
these things? But
because I've said it before to people about Fiat, and it's like, what are you talking about?
well,
It's like,
well, into pound sterling or a national
yeah.
currency or
So
whatever. Yeah.
it is one of those things you can't assume that people know what the jargon is either, or what the language is.
No,
The language is
no,
so different.
no.
I mean, I worked in a theatre, but if I went to a job centre, they think I'm a NHS nurse. No, do you know? So the language, it does really matter as well, and that's
Yeah,
something I did
yeah.
find that
The
a lot of
trouble is,
people.
the onus is on you to know how this. You can't say, "Well, I don't know. I didn't know about it. Sorry, Mr. HMRC."
Yeah,
It's you
but it is a very, I must admit, I mean, it's not simple at all. If you go onto our government website, and especially you just break it down to everything on there is a kind of language that you need to relearn, the way that everything's
mm,
written, but
mm.
it is a minefield. There's so much of it. And, it can take you weeks and weeks to be able to read,
Complicated. There's a lot that the latest guidance is like a manual. It's huge,
yeah,
right? And they
yeah.
added a section for DeFi, like I think it was February last year, so it's getting really big. I mean, one thing about education, HMRC have done something called they call them nudge letters, which is a reminder. So I think since 2019, you definitely UK exchanges have all been passing your data to HMRC. Okay, this is all down, existing kind of legislation about money laundering and all these sort of things. So they
Mm,
know who's buying and selling. I think it was Coinbase. They emailed their customers and said, if you spent more than £5,000 on crypto, we're going to pass that to HMRC. And then HMRC sent these nudge letters out. So they're not saying you're going to be investigated, just saying, look, these are the rules for crypto, when you spend it, when you swap from one token to another and everything. And they sent that
excellent.
out to people to sort of, so there's a bit of education there. So things are improving a lot, but it's still a lot for
Your average,
most retail investors
yeah.
don't know much
And
about it.
as I say, I mean, I think we've touched on this, but do you think that's why adoption is so slow, so
Yeah, I
low?
think so. Yeah, I mean, so I've been in crypto since like 2013, and I was thinking earlier about it. You know, I was actually on the BBC guy. I was one of the first people to buy. I bought a Kit Kat in a little shop in Swanage with Bitcoin, my little what was it, blockchain.info wallet or something at the time. And there was so much more adoption back then.
Hmm.
High street shops were using Bitcoin.
There's a brewery like Brewdog or something
Oh,
as well, where you
Brewdog
could
were
get in
using
and
it,
you
weren't
could,
they, in London?
yeah,
Yeah.
buy beer and stuff. So I
Yeah,
don't know
yeah.
if
There's a
that's
lot of
still
companies were
going.
using it, a lot online, a lot of actual retailers, and but not anymore. And well, I mean, obviously, a lot of it's because of the cost, right? The fees, the transaction fees on BTC are horrendous. But also, I think why would you want to use something where you've got to kind of keep a record of everything you're spending. Imagine if you had to do that, everything you bought, in a suit, everything you bought with
Well, yeah.
fiat,
I
you
mean,
had to keep a
you,
record
you,
of.
you do a job, you get paid, you go and buy food. You use
Yeah.
your cash. Not if I give £10 over because I bought some munchies, I'm not gonna go right. Okay, list everything. I bought my chocolates, my biscuits, my crisps. My kind of whatever it is.
Yeah.
Milkshake
I
or
mean,
whatever.
yeah, I think it is that. I think it does hold us back, adoption. And until crypto assets are recognized in law or in legislation as a separate asset class, then maybe they can have changed the rules, right? So
Yeah.
they could do
Well, I
something.
suppose this is what we were saying earlier, though. I mean, it is really more of an enterprise business kind of. It's not like your average Joe blogs on the street. You don't want to get rid of cash completely, but you do
No.
want to be able to stop money laundering, to stop, you know, fraud and things
Yeah,
like that.
fraud
So
and being more private and so on.
yeah, so for enterprise businesses, it's a great thing because you can then track down to the thousandth of a cent, even more so, to find out where that money is actually going. So explain. Well, capital gains we know is
So yeah, it's basically it's identical to how you do stocks and shares. But actually, recently there was in the guidance. I don't know there was a DeFi guidance put out in February last year, and
so. So I put £500 into a DeFi. Not that I would, but personally. But say if you are someone out there and you put £500 into DeFi, and say you're getting, I don't know, this is all made up. You're getting £10 a week in interest. Yeah.
yeah,
So
but yeah. So this is the complicated bit because I don't know if you remember, like lots of people were saying about you could basically put some like Bitcoin down as to get a loan, like put it down as collateral, borrow some money, and then buy more. A lot of people were doing that.
that's a
You
bad
know,
idea. Isn't
bit,
that
bit,
something? Yeah,
bit,
that's a bad idea.
well, it's all timing, isn't it? But not a good idea. But in the legislation, not in the legislation, in the guidance they gave last year, they announced that when you you do that, you put money down as collateral. It's actually it counts as a disposal, right? So that's a taxable event. People thought that it wasn't,
Right.
and this is a problem where they say it's like stocks and shares, but then in the DeFi case, it's not like stocks and shares because if you lend stocks and shares, if you put stocks and shares as collateral, it's not a
Yeah.
disposal.
You say it's like property, so it's like putting your house up.
Yeah, and then yeah. But you'd only be a disposal if you didn't keep up, if you didn't make the repayments. You don't sort of sell the house,
No.
You only have to sell the house if you don't pay, if you don't keep up the payments. So it's so there's a little bit, and there's a big pushback against HMRC again for that sort of that guidance being wrong, and there's a big sort of consultation going on at the moment. They've asked for sort of input from the industry about it, and so that may change. And that's the thing. It's just guidance. It's their interpretation of old legislation on as I say, this Chargeable Gains Act of 1992.
I mean,
So it's
I
all
do.
evolving all the time. It's hard enough
Yeah.
to keep up with. I don't know how you're supposed to kind of keep up with it all.
I'm thinking you send 1,000, you send like 1,000th of a penny, and it's like I've got to keep a track of every
Yeah.
single 1,000th of a penny transaction, and every single one of those is a taxable event. And
Yeah. I mean, it probably
you
won't
know,
have any tax on it because it's so small, right? But you still got,
but it's
but
still
but
something
but
you
you
need to
still
look
got
at.
to put it through. You got to
Yeah,
have a record of it because if you get audited, they need to see
yeah,
everything.
yeah,
Actually, so I've had someone come to me a couple of years ago who actually he's been audited by HMRC because he didn't know that the crypto to crypto, one token to another was a taxable event, and
right.
now he's been, he's got to provide every record of everything.
And it is interesting as well because you are expected to know this.
Mm,
mistake, and that's, from their point of view, it's no excuse if you don't know it, because they've put the information out there. But just because you haven't taken the time or you're not aware of it is not an excuse not to do it. You've got to go out there and find the information and understand the information, and then execute that information and do what is necessary. So
Yeah, yeah.
this is another thing as well. So I
Yeah,
mean,
so
this is,
there's a big education piece missing. I mean, obviously they're doing a bit, but we as a community need to educate ourselves more about this
well,
because
like you say, I mean, I should imagine it's taken them a long time to be able to get to a point where they're at to understand it all as well.
oh yeah, I mean it's always like cat and mouse. I mean things are moving pretty fast, aren't they, with DeFi and stuff like this? And it's
Yeah.
kind of so. I mean,
And
they
then,
haven't given any guidance on NFTs yet. They're supposed to be bringing a new guidance on NFTs. I mean, they do mention it slightly because it obviously you don't pull an NFT is it's you don't pull them all together. They're individual, right? No
well,
guidance has been
again,
given yet.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? It's like, your JPEG. If you are going to charge for your JPEG and you're going to sell that, well, yeah, obviously that is a taxable event because it's a sale,
Yeah,
really.
it's a sale, but then you've also got things like royalties from resale. So there's the income tax from that and so on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
so your music and everything as well. So yeah, if
yeah,
you've got an NFT and it's got 7% royalty on it every time that's resold on a secondary market, you have to keep a track of what that royalty payment is that's coming into you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's
And
difficult with VAT. Do you charge VAT or not? Because and who's responsible for putting the VAT on? Is it you or is
yeah,
it the site that's selling it on all these sort
yeah.
of things?
And this is a
Um,
good example as well with split transactions as well. Because, I mean, these are things that you could forget about. You could have done a podcast video with somebody on, I think, is it, or say, for example, I know there's a Streamable, and Streamanity was there, and you could
mm,
do split transactions.
mm,
So that split transaction, say you've got 5,000 coming in. Again, these are all things that you've got to keep a track on, and
yeah,
it's like you say, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So, how long did it take you to come up with this piece of software? I mean, because it is so
A long time. It kind of evolved really because so I started in 2018. And it evolved because the guidance kept coming out. It took about 4 years. I think actually the strange thing was the guidance that came out in 2018. It came out about a month before you had to have your tax return done. HMRC,
right.
they're
Okay.
always good with timing. It's
Always
always like a
nice.
month before you got the deadline or a month afterwards.
Yeah. So
Um,
it's just pulling your hair out.
yeah, you're like, oh god, I've got it all wrong. Actually, most of the time, it was pretty close to what the guidance was because we were looking at letters and things that accountants had sent to them. So it was but some things had to be adjusted and so on. So it's constantly evolving, and also these files, these export files that have got your all your data in, from wallets and exchanges. There's no standard, okay? So everyone is different, and they change them all the time. So things break all the time. So you're constantly having to update these parsers. I mean, that's the great benefit of this project being open source, is
Yeah.
that when things do break, or there's new wallets or something, people can can add those put those changes, add the code for that, and so on. So that helps as well.
So in the UK, then, when you're actually submitting your tax return, what do you put it down as? You just put it down as a crypto asset?
It's under the section. It's in the capital gains, so it's an SA 108 form, capital gains summary. But it's down as, I think it's other property and assets. I think they call it, because
Okay.
most of it's sort of stocks and shares and securities and all these sort of things. But it's under the sort of other property, and that's what it classed
So make
as.
sure that you're declaring it under the right
Yeah, the
category.
right section.
Otherwise,
Yeah, I think I mentioned it
you're
I
going to have
mentioned it in the documentation. Yeah. Yeah, you need to
This is
put
a great, I mean, this is a great tool. It is a fabulous tool. And as I said at the beginning, this is something that everybody is going to need. And not everybody probably is aware that they need. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to assume, but I'm sure there are people out there that really don't know that this is something that they really need to do,
Mm.
and keep a track on. Um,
Yeah, I
like
mean,
literally.
the worst you can do is assume that you'll never need to, you haven't made a profit. You don't have to, you declare anything, because at some point you will go over your allowance or whatever,
Yeah.
this tax free allowance, and then, like I say, you've got to go all the way back to the start to work it out, what whether you made a gain or a loss. So it's better to
And
keep on top of things and be
and
proactive.
this is just a handful of examples as well. This
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
be, I mean,
Yeah, so it does all
but
like Trezors and ledgers and stuff like that, and you've got all these exchanges, and yeah, that's a little bit out of date now, because there's new ones
well,
are
that's
being added all the
yeah,
time.
that's what I mean. I mean, this is really why I wouldn't trade. I mean, I only play, and that's it. Probably spent about £10, made nothing, and that's it. I wouldn't even go there anymore. Make
Mm.
sure, guys, that you do go and declare all your gains and your losses and do your tax.
Yeah, and keep records. Like I say, keep records of everything, because like sometimes these exchanges close down, you can't get them anymore. So
Mm,
always, because if you just go to HMRC, I haven't got any records, they're going to say, well, you're supposed to, legally you're supposed to have them.
yeah, yeah, which is a good point as well. A good point. So, is there anything else that you can think of that people need to know?
Trying to think, I've got like let's have a look. Some tips on.
I mean, how do people get in touch with you if they need
Yeah,
your
so I
help?
mean, if they want to get in touch, so yeah, if you go on that GitHub page, you can email me or contact me on there. There's also a Discord, so there's a sort of like a support Discord. So we've got about 250 people on there that and chatting about different tax questions, or if they got problems using it, or questions. So there's a Discord, and there's a link on that page as well to Discord.
Okay,
Um,
where's the link? Is it at the top or
right at the very top. I think it's under chat.
okay? Oh, and
Um,
I see you've got the HMRC
yeah,
resources
so
in
there's all
here
the
as well.
guidance there. There's a webinar as well, a video from an old webinar. Yeah, so all
Cool.
the
So
guidance
let's
is
go
linked.
all the way back then.
I think it's
So
under chat.
basically,
There's a little chat, like a little you see where it says chat and 35 online. If you click on there, down, you see where these little coloured badges are.
oh, here,
Yeah, see it says chat.
here, yeah,
Click on that. That'll go to the
cool.
Discord.
Okay,
Yeah,
excellent. So we
yeah.
can join Bittytax, and then if you've got any problems
Any
whatsoever,
questions, go on there and
so are you in there all the time then?
well. Try not to be. No, sometimes, yeah. I mean, the good thing is there's enough people using it that someone else normally pipes up if I'm not around. So,
Yeah, that's cool. Thank
I
you
mean, that's
so
the
much.
thing. That's the nice thing about having the community behind it, is there's other people who use it and they can kind of help out, which is good.
Yeah, and they
It's
can
good for
help.
me.
Yeah, like literally, thank you so much for going over this. I mean, as I said,
Oh, thanks for
times
inviting me.
already, it is a really useful tool, and it's something that you've taken a long time to actually be able to get right as well.
Mm.
And for myself, it's going to be awesome because we have got the tax years coming up. So the
Yeah,
whole of
yeah,
literally the rest of this month, I'll be doing my gains. Well, they're not gains; they're probably big losses at the moment, but at least I'll be doing those. Filing them into the right categories and then going from there for next
yeah,
year. But
yeah,
good point. Download all of your transaction data from your wallets, go over to Bittytax, put it through Bittytax, and then make sure that you do your HMRC.
yeah. That's right. It sure
That's
should be good.
excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Diddy. Thanks so much. Take care.